What's up, everybody? Welcome to a very special Kind of Funny Gamescast for Thursday, February 20th, 2025. I'm one of your hosts, Greg Miller, alongside Executive Director and Video Game Industry Analyst at Circana, Matt Piscatella. Hello, Matt!
Wow, hello, Greg Miller. Hello, chat. Hello, fellow video game enthusiasts. Really great to be here.
I can't believe we're finally getting you on the show, Matt. As much as we have bantered back and forth online, whether it be the old days on Twitter and the new days on Blue Sky, wherever it may be, whether it be you big timing me at Lawson's Carvery. What I mean? It's E3. You're right in front of me in line. You won't even stop your conversation to say hi. I forget. Don't worry.
It's one of my darkest hours and something I regret all of the time. I feel terrible about it.
Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day to come talk to us today and answer the question, is the gaming industry doomed? Before we even get into that, not everyone is as dialed into social media as many of us are. Not everybody pays attention to the names we read every day on Kind of Funny Games Daily. Who are you and what do you do?
Very envious of those people. You're making the right decisions. Well, my name's Matt. As Greg mentioned, I'm the executive director of video games at Circana, which is formerly the NPD group. We had a little bit of a merger a few years ago. Before that, I spent a bunch of years at Activision and then Activision Blizzard, where I did everything from trade marketing analysis to business intelligence and green light forecasting. And then went over to Warner Brothers Games for a bunch of years. I was the vice president of sales planning and analysis over at WB Games. So everything with a number. Basically, if you've ever said, hey, they dropped the price of a game, or hey, they priced that game at this, or hey, they're not putting enough copies in a store, I was they.
You were the problem?
Yeah, I did all of the bad things, I guess.
So I think, the question I have before we jump into all this stuff, but talking about you now being this video game industry analyst at Circana, what does that look like on a daily basis for you? I know you, of course, from the fun social media graphs and information you put out about, year over year, month over month, this is what's happening. But what does that look like on a daily for you?
So my job is to dig deep into the data, whether that's what people are playing, where they're playing, what they're playing, who they're playing with, why they're playing, and uncover the stories that'll help folks in the industry, whether it's publishers or retailers or developers, help them understand where the player is and what might be coming next. So my job is to find the story in the numbers and be able to tell that to folks so that they can make better planning decisions.
And when you say the numbers, does that mean you're going through SteamDB every day? You're waiting for whatever trinkets that PlayStation, Xbox will give you about monthly active users?
Well, we have a number of ways. We collect all the physical sales from retailers. We collect all of the digital sales from participating publishers directly from the first party. So we have all of the actual data there. We also do extensive primary research across a number of different panels and studies and surveys. We're all over the place when it comes not just to what's selling, but also what people are playing and where and why. So, the stuff we talk about publicly is a very small portion of what we're doing. It's like the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we're looking at and what we're trying to understand and listening to the consumer and trying to better satisfy what they want and need.
Excellent. And that's why we're going to have quite the conversation about if the video game industry is doomed right after I remind everybody that this is the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Each and every weekday on a variety of platforms, we run you through the biggest topics in video games. Whether it be reviews, previews, or conversations we need to have, you can watch them live on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames, and podcast services around the globe each and every weekday. If you are watching live, why not be part of the show? Get your questions teed up for Matt by using the YouTube Super Chat function. You can ask questions to Matt, to me, to discussion topics. Get it all in there so we can have a great podcast. Remember, if you love this show, you need to support it. We're an 11-person small business all about live talk shows. We need your support with the Kind of Funny membership over on patreon.com/kindoffunny, youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, Apple and Spotify. $10 gets you the membership, and that gets gets you all of our shows each and every month ad-free, the ability to watch the afternoon podcast live as we record them, and of course your daily dose of me in a series we call Greg Way. Housekeeping for you. Like I said, we're all about live talk shows. You already got the Pokemon Presents predictions over on Kinda Funny Games Daily. And after this, you're going to get a stream with Andy and Nick showing off Avowed with NVIDIA DLSS 4 for our sponsor stream from our friends at NVIDIA. Also, you might notice no Blessing, no Mike today. That's because they're winging it to Chicago right now, and they're doing a meetup on Friday. If you want to go to the Portillo's off Canal and Taylor at 7:30 p.m., you can meet and greet Mike and Blessing. If that's not enough for you, remember, of course, the Portillo collection is live right now. You can grab our new design or one of our vintage Porty designs over on the Kinda Funny merch shop at kindafunny.com/store to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. There's a couple copies of my book, Portillo the Wiener Dog Thinks He's a Manatee. And of course, you can get the Portellini pasta. It's a dachshund-shaped pasta from our friends at Mill Valley Pasta, all on kindafunny.com/store. If you are a Kinda Funny member, my Greg Way about Captain America will be up momentarily. And of course, you can get Predator in review this afternoon, just like our Patreon producers will, Delaney Twining, Carl Jacobs, Omega Buster, and Karen Lindener. Thank you to our sponsors, Built Rewards, Factor, and Stash, but we'll tell you about that later. For now, let's begin the show with Topic of the Show. Matt, I did a great job teeing you up. I showed you know the numbers, you're listening to consumers, you're paying attention to the graphs and stuff. The question here is the video game industry doomed? Because a lot of these numbers don't look great when I hear them. When I ask you, is the video game industry doomed? How do you come at that answer?
Well, first, let me make sure the mic's still working. I kind of crapped out there.
You sound great. No, you look great. You sound great.
Awesome. All right, what kind of timeline are we talking about here? Are we talking short term, couple years, or like in 100 million?
I love this podcast already. I love this podcast already. Give me the short term and the long term. Are we doomed? What's happening?
All right, so no. And in fact, consumer behavior is very strong. Like the demand from folks for video game content, whether to play or spend, is still as high as it's ever been. What the challenge is and where the change is happening is where they're playing, why they're playing, and where they're spending. And we're in a period of really big, meaningful change. But the good news is this is pretty easily explainable about how we got to where we are. The big challenge is what's happening right now and the uncertainty it brings, and then what happens next.
Sure.
So no, but things are certainly changing in pretty fundamental ways.
I love that response. For you, what is the biggest fundamental shift you're seeing right now and forecasting for in the next 5 years?
Well, there's two things. The first thing is where we are in terms of the total industry. Now, for decades, right, video games have been a growth category. Big growth as more players entered the space, as more ways of play developed. Organically, the industry grew. In 20 and 21, that changed. Everyone who wanted to play as much as they wanted to play and spend as much as they wanted to were able to. So instead of having organic player growth in a lot of markets, we hit a ceiling. Now there are still pockets of there are still territories where growth is still happening in a big way. India, China, Brazil.
Sure.
But for those territories that have had a video game market for a long time, we've hit ceilings. And so we've gone from a growth industry to a mature industry. And what that means is it kind of changes how people look at investing. The other thing that's happened, of course, is the live service game revolution. I have some stats for you we could get into in a bit. But the amount of players and the amount of time that are going to the biggest live service games in an era where we have more games being made than ever before, and when we have a ceiling on player count, is making a really big, tight bunch of competition there that's been absolutely brutal. And we could get into that, but those two things are what are really combining to kind of put us where we are in terms of the market.
I love all of that. So the one I want to double back to is you talk about in 20 and 21, that change, that we went from a growth market to a mature market. When you say that, is that just, Was that COVID related? Because that was our big thing, it felt like, in 2020, right? Everybody's at home, and suddenly people are like, well, I'm just going to buy a PlayStation, I'm going to buy an Xbox, I'm going to do whatever. Is that what that really was?
Absolutely. The stay-at-home activities, people change their entire social lives to revolve around gaming. And we saw significant growth in both player count and hours across all demographic groups, across every psychographic profile. And hopefully, honestly, we never have to see that again. Because you don't want a society that's forced to stay home and just play video games, right? Yeah. We want to do that when we're, not going to work one day or playing hooky from school, playing hooky. Wow. But yeah, so like that's what that was all about. And when you have that happen, and all of a sudden you go, okay, well, this is the player base. This is as big as it's going to get. How do we grow? And the only way you can really do that is to have each player that's still playing pay a little bit more, which is another reason why we're seeing some of the things we're seeing from publishers and developers.
So then, fascinating. My question really then becomes, as we're talking about the future, we're talking about this. You have this mature market, everybody in 2021 who could get it. You listen to the show. You hear me talk all the time, then I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about, but I think I got a okay grasp on this. Am I right when I'm saying the layoffs and closures and all of this happening is because we're still seeing publishers, venture capitalists, investors who bet on the growth they saw in 2021 and 2021 not stopping? Did they do this thinking? Did they do this not knowing we were at the ceiling?
Some absolutely thought that growth was going to continue. Others were a lot smarter about it. But yeah, some of what we're seeing now is from overinvestment, driven by this idea that, the line was going to keep going up when it came to players and hours, and it just didn't. All kinds of reasons for that. People had to go back to work, had to go back to school, really had to go back to work because the prices of things around everyday spending categories from housing to grocery have continued to accelerate. And, people are really getting squeezed. So they're making decisions about what to do with their time and their money. That's having an impact in what we're seeing in the video game space, surely. So that's a big part of it. When you're a growth category forever and you change to a mature category, all of a sudden the economics around investment decisions change significantly. You're playing a share game rather than a growth game, meaning that, for a long time, the market would grow organically, so you could grow as well. The tide lifts all boats.
Sure.
But in this kind of market, if you're going to get an hour of playtime, you have to take it from some other game or some other platform, right? And so the entire dynamic of the strategic decisions and tactical decisions change based on what happened there.
So then my question now becomes, are we to a point when we look at developers, when we look at people making games, where the bloodletting will stop soon? Like, are we to a point where people who want to publish games understand now that there isn't this infinite growth? They understand they could hopefully make this much profit, and that they're investing in things that are going on. I'm drawn to the one, the only Jason Schreier, of course. I subscribe to his Bloomberg newsletter called Game On, coming out of DICE last week, where I hosted an award show. I crushed it. Everybody loved my performance. He has a whole thing in here talking about how, it used to be this, it used to be that, and now there's not a great vibe, right? But despite the packed bars and coffee shops, the vibes were not fantastic at DICE. Last year, the most common phrase in town was, quote, survive until 25, end quote. This year, those who have made it are looking for a new pithy mantra, perhaps persist until 26. It talks about, of course, tens of thousands of people have been laid off. Venture capitalists who were once offering huge seed rounds at hefty valuations as they look for the next Roblox have scaled back in a big way. Global turmoil and softened appetites have scared off investors from Chinese companies. Few believe that this wave of layoffs is over. Taking that context and that color and applying it to the numbers, are you seeing publishers, venture capitalists wake up to the fact of where we are now?
Oh yeah, the risk calculation is happening. maybe to an extreme on the downside, meaning that, as over enthusiastic as some folks may have been in like 20 and 21, we're now seeing the opposite, where we have maybe a little bit more pessimism than is really warranted.
Oh, okay.
But that's kind of natural. It's never as good as you think it is when it's good, and it's never as bad as you think it is when it's bad.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of where we are. The survive the 25 thing. Yeah, I use that phrase too. I think I might have used it near the beginning of it, but that idea was all around switch to Grand Theft Auto 6, reinvigorating folks to come back into gaming that may have stepped back from it over the last few years, and getting investors excited again about the category. So maybe we should have said survive to the middle of 25 or whenever
they delay GTA 6 too, whenever that actually pops out.
I can't even think of that. I would get another ulcer, and I've got too many.
Okay, so then I like to hear it's not as bad. When it's bad, it's not even as bad as you think it is. That's helpful. In the short term, what are we looking at? Like, again, I kind of asked it, but then I monologued for a while there. Like, is the bloodletting going to let up soon? Are we going to get out of this where how many more cuts can there be?
Ooh, I hope so. The challenge we have, right? So let's talk about service games for a second.
Please.
If you take the top 10 service games every month, you're talking Grand Theft Auto Online, Roblox, GTA, or Call of Duty, Marvel Rivals right now.
Sure.
You take the 10 biggest live service games on PlayStation and Xbox. 7 out of every 10 people that turn on their console will play at least one of those games every month. And in terms of total time they're taking, those 10 games alone every month take up 40% of total play time on the consoles. So, you look back 10 years before the big revolution of live service games, people would get the big game, they'd move to the next big game, move to the next big game. You had that full pool of players and hours to pull from. Now, because of these live service behemoths, half of the gaming time on consoles is just gone. Is going to be eaten by those games, right? So you're fighting more and more for those hours and players that are remaining. The other part of that is the audience is really changing their purchasing behavior than they had even 10 years ago. Now, your audience, right, the people here in the chat, you're on the very extreme enthusiast side, right? Let me tell you some
If you're watching a live video game talk show, you're you're not the majority. So,
just real quick on purchase frequency, like how many games someone buys in a period, right?
Yeah.
30% of people that play video games will not buy a video game this year.
Wow.
So that's a third of the audience that just won't buy. A further 18% purchase a new game every 6 months or less frequently. So these are your folks that are buying Madden or EAFC, or they're picking up Call of Duty, right? Your big mass market only kind of buyer. The kind of purchaser that's watching this show, you're probably buying at least one game a month, maybe more. Only 12% of video game players buy a game once a month. Only 4% buy games more often than once per month. So, when we're talking about the developers and the publishers that are really being hurt the most, that we're talking the most about, are the games that are really targeting this like 16% of total players that are, purchasing very frequently, while the mass majority of players are buying a game or two a year and they're playing Fortnite, Minecraft, and Roblox. And I think that's like the biggest challenge. The biggest competitor to any new video game is Fortnite. I will die on that hill, no matter what it is, because you have to fight Fortnite before you fight anything else to get your game seen and purchased. And that's like the biggest challenge I think happening right now.
A question I always have when we talk about this and we're talking about the numbers and blah, blah, and obviously when we jump to people trying to compete with Fortnite, trying to put out the next great live service, right? Rest in peace, Concord. And move on to all these different games. And I know Concord is live service, but stick with me. It's the conversation I have, and the question that raises here is everything you just said good news for indies? We talk about indie development, right? You talk about this 18% that are the hardcore buying multiple games in a month. I always talk about on these shows, right, that the level of success Kind of Funny needs is so much smaller than the level of success IGN needs on their videos, right? And so I look at game development that same way. When you see inevitably Square Enix publish a game and they'd be like, it didn't meet expectations, versus some indie mouthwashing sold 500,000 copies and they're over the moon and they're coming to console now and it's going to be great. Like when we talk about this and how hard it is to make that big game and get that share of time, is that good news for indies because they're making something smaller with a level of success, a level of getting into the black that's better?
So there's opportunities and there's risks, right? The ability to be flexible, the ability to have a smaller budget, the ability to do whatever you can do in a much faster fashion than a big publisher can is absolutely an advantage. The challenge is discoverability is getting more difficult rather than less difficult. The democratization of publishing means that we're seeing just this rapid increase in the number of games available, whether they're actual good, well-developed games or games that are just churned out. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
The shovelware out there,
of course.
The competition for discoverability is really difficult. So there's pluses and minuses there, but personally, when a game does hit from the indie space, it hits in a pretty big way now that it might not have before. But boy, is it really hard to get seen, right?
Sure.
That's the challenge.
In this conversation of bringing up Square Enix, talking about indies, I liked this Blue Sky post from you February 9th. Look, sometimes sales expectations for a game are based on reasonable benchmarks and forecasting, but often they are the result of a formula that includes things like costs and profit expectations. Folks at pubs know when a target is aggressive, but you don't plan a sales target that loses money. It's reasonable to make an argument pointing out where breakdowns happen that caused a game to disappoint. But it isn't because folks at pubs aren't hyper aware of what reasonable sales expectations are. Can we go into depth on this? Because this is one of those forecasting things that obviously we don't know ahead of time, and then it is, guess what? Dragon Age the Veilguard came out after going from being a multiplayer thing to being a single player thing to getting all this different hate, and then it did, and then they're like, guess what? It didn't move nearly enough copies for us to think it's a success. And we're all like, well, that's a good number of copies, but you only gave it 2 months. But like, can you drill into this a bit with me and talk about what sales expectations really mean in this industry?
Sure. Like this is what I did for a decade at both Activision and Warner. And everything from Mortal Kombat to Arkham to Lego to Call of Duty and Guitar Hero.
Sure.
The process works. So there's a process called greenlight. And it's basically a gate where a game is either greenlit for further development or redlit, meaning development is canceled. There are numerous gates that go all the way from concept phase all the way to launch. There could be 6, 7, 8 gates depending on the length of development. At each of those points, a forecast is created, a P&L is created, a profit and loss statement, which takes into account both potential revenues and potential costs, and ultimately to a profit estimation. In order for a game to get through those green lights, everyone involved in the planning, from the most senior leadership all the way down, has to agree that we believe there is a chance that this P&L is possible, that this profit is possible, right? And so as inputs change, whether, hey, we need another year of development, that's going to cost X million dollars. Can we absorb that? Do we think we can achieve a higher Metacritic? Can we get to a bigger audience? How is this going to be likely able to allow us to increase our revenue expectations? If so, then those levers all change. It's all part of a big equation. And at the beginning, you may have hey, here's the game. Here's our expectations on when it'll launch, what platforms it'll launch on, the genre, everything that could make up a game's basically quantifiable components. And you come to a sales target, say, we think this game can sell 3.2 million units, right? But over time, as all of those inputs change, as all of the intricacies happen over the course of development, that number can change quite a bit so long as everyone holds hands and says, okay, we're going to believe that we can do this. We're going to believe we can hit this target. And even when everyone knows that, hey, this is a pretty stretch case, like this is a very optimistic scenario, but we think it's possible. The fact, let me turn it around, right? Like Veilguard in particular. Veilguard had a very troubled development. It took a long time, a lot of years. Courses changed. The fact the game continued to get greenlit was a show of confidence that they believed that this game was going to be able to overcome the challenges it had in development, right? Sure. The fact the game made it out is actually a very positive thing, because I've been a part of a lot of games where we just said, you know what, this isn't going to work, cut it. And that decision's extremely difficult. If a game is canceled in development, it is for darn good reasons, because there's no belief that the expectations would be able to get met. It's a very drawn out, it's a process that involves so many people, so many inputs, so many opinions. And at the end of the day, you come up with a number, and that number might not be exactly what you think that game is likely to sell, but you think there's enough likelihood that it could, that you believe that it's still worth putting the game out. And whenever that happens, it's a great thing, because it shows that people are believing in each other, that this thing could actually work. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not because everyone didn't understand what was happening along the way.
That's fascinating. And one of the questions I want to present and then give a hypothetical one is, right, when we see games get canceled, especially when they're further on, I always talk about the point of no return. And again, this is just me talking, not knowing anything. But all right, the game's been in development so long, I always think of the idea of, well, some money from the project is better than no money from the project. Is that a foolish, or am I summing it up? Am I being too simplistic with that answer? Because obviously there's plenty of games that don't make it out through the gate. And I think, yesterday, 2 days ago, when we talked about Fair Games and the rumor that it's been delayed further out or whatever, I've been saying for a while, and Blessing's now on my team, of like, Fair Games I don't think is ever going to come out. So I do expect one day to get the announcement that they've canceled Fair Games. But then the conversation yesterday, 2 days ago, when Blessing brought up my thing and tried to take it as his own opinion, which I see, Blessing, don't try to take my opinions. But the conversation was, well, then why wouldn't you cancel it here, right? If we think it's gonna be canceled later on, why would you delay it here? I guess, still green gate it, have the game go forward, but not kill it here. And I know I'm asking you to talk about a hypothetical that's pulled from the real news, but you can take Haven Studios out of it and Fair Games out of it and compare another game that made it, got delayed, but still got canceled. Like, why not kill it in the crib right now?
Right. So you're doing that at every point along the way, whether it's concept, alpha, beta, all the way down to gold. You're doing a probability calculation. And what I mean by that is you have certain levels of return you expect. So you're bringing out a new game and you say, you know what, this game could make $1 billion, but we're only probably 5% likely to get $1 billion. This game could lose $100 million, but we're only 10% likely to do that. You have a number of scenarios. You have a number of probabilities. You do that math. If it's negative, you cancel the game, right? And that's it's a very simplistic way of putting it. But you're always doing that evaluation. And no, there's not like a spreadsheet with that actually happening. I'm speaking figuratively.
Of course.
That's the idea around scenario planning. And you go, okay, we feel good, we don't feel good, red light, green light. And so if you think there's still a chance that you can make it work, you continue to green light it, because you have so many jobs on the line.
Of course.
You have total physical plans on the line, your annual operating plans on the line. Killing a game is exceptionally painful for all kinds of reasons, including, not just the game itself, but the jobs that are tied to it, the people. That you want to be exceptionally clear that what you're doing is being done from, a point of really detailed analysis. So long-winded answer, yeah.
You're killing it. You're killing it, Matt. And thank you for bringing stats and figures. Everybody's having a great time in chat. But I want to pull one from chat. Francisco in the YouTube chat says, people are being cruel to fair games. We haven't even seen gameplay of the game yet. Yes, I know it's a live service, but to judge before seeing it, WTF. I want to answer, but kick it to you of like, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying Fair Games is a bad game. I'm saying Fair Games is entering an incredibly crowded market. And you're talking about these juggernauts of live service that I just don't see. Not even Haven, Jade, PlayStation. I just don't like. I'm thinking of the probabilities. How many games have we seen try to scale this mountain and then be littered with the corpses of other games that didn't make it? Am I being cruel?
No, that's the exact calculation you have to make. But the people that know best about the game are the people making the game, and hopefully secondarily the publisher.
Yeah.
And you're making those evaluations with that framework. But you're doing it with, okay, how likely are we to succeed? How likely are we to not succeed? And, if they still have enough confidence to keep going, it's like, okay, we're going to give it another year, whatever game it is.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Let's see what happens by the next gate. And then that's great. That means that people believe in it. And that's what you want to see. But if they don't and they kill it, that's not done lightly. And when you hear about that and people go, well, how could they kill that game? That game would be such a great seller. And it's like, well, they killed it because it wasn't going to be, or wasn't likely to be. And that's the conversations that are happening.
CJ splits on super chats just like you can to be part of the show over on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames and says, are Fortnite and similar black hole games actually harmful?
Okay.
The pause, the thought, and the okay.
Okay. The two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it are games like Fortnite or Minecraft or Roblox, games that last forever, allow people of all kinds of people to play them. You don't need to have a lot of money. You can play with your friends. You can build a community. Like, from that perspective, the games are great. They allow people to, have a great time and not ask a lot of them if they don't want to. But for everyone making new games, they're a huge challenge to overcome now because they have such gravity. People have invested so much time, so many dollars. Their friends are there. Like, all of the hooks in those games are exceptionally difficult to overcome. You have to have a very special game to break out, right? And people aren't jumping from new game to new game to new game like they were in the past. It really takes a special new game to get people to jump in, like the mass market. Not everyone in the chat here, you guys are generally playing a lot of stuff, but for the mass market consumer, am I going to go spend $70, $60 on this new game, or am I just going to hang out with my buddies in Fortnite? A lot of the times they're picking Fortnite.
Of course. Yeah, this is, it's a classic story for us. The success of Helldivers 2. I had been such a fan of the original, did not see this coming, did not expect this. We're here, we're playing it every day. And of course, my 10-year-old nephew, Jack, Poe's son, came and visited. And we finally got him to play with us after him wanting to stream Fortnite with us for so long. He started playing Helldivers, played multiple days with it. And then on that last day, he was like, this game's so cool. And we're like, yeah, are you going to get your friends to play it? And he's like, oh no, they'll never play this. We're like, what do you mean? And he's like, no, they're never going to play Helldivers. And that's what you're talking about, right? It's the investment. It's getting all of your friends on board. It's the reason we see things like Split Fiction, Hazelight, right? Where you one person can buy it and at least share it so you can play it that way. Like, there's so many moving parts to this to get someone anywhere else. Like, I always joke about like how hard it is to get anyone in the world to click a link. I put out the blue sky, I put out the post, and I'm like, Matt's on the show, and everybody's like, oh, that's really cool, but such a small percentage of them are going to click the free link to watch the free show versus talking about how you're going to get somebody to go buy these games to go play with you.
Yeah, I think everyone's got stories like that, personal stories, and can relate to this kind of idea. But that's what folks making games are up against now. And that's not the case or where it was 10 years ago. On the plus side, these live service games are keeping people in gaming and engaged. On the negative side, it's really making it difficult to break through with something new.
Is it fair? Because when I talk about these and I think about this, and I'm thinking about Jack and all his friends at school playing Fortnite, and that's just where they go and they hang out after school and blah, blah, blah. Is it fair that like a lot of, if not the majority of Fortnite live, the big live service game players wouldn't play anything else? Like, you know what I mean? Like the people who are addicted to Warzone and play Warzone every night. Like I remember when Call of Duty was a box game and it was cool. There are gamers who are only buying their Xbox to play Call of Duty multiplayer. They weren't the ones who were like, I'm also going to try this JRPG. I'm also going to try this. Like I would hope the benefit, and you can tell me if you're seeing any results to this, are you bring in a generation like Jack, you bring in older gamers who play the game for free, and maybe they do like that so much that then they are encouraged to look at the store. Is that just wishful thinking?
No, and I think it's one of the things why, like when I look at Grand Theft Auto 6, it's not just a benefit for Rockstar and Take-Two.
Sure.
Because that's the kind of game that gets people into consoles, right? That's the kind of game that makes people buy a new box. And hopefully then you get them buying accessories, or they're subscribing to something, or they're picking up some other new games. That's how that works, that blockbuster bringing in audience. And hopefully they do try some other things. And I think that's perfectly reasonable, and why so many people are looking at Grand Theft Auto 6, not just for what it can do for Rockstar and Take-Two, but what it can do for the entire industry. Whether it will or not, I mean, who can say at this point?
You saved that. I had that question. I want to ask that question, but first I want to remind people about the Kinda Funny membership. Of course, you can pick up the Kinda Funny membership if you love what we do here. An 11-person small business making live talk shows about video games all day long. Pick up a membership over on patreon.com/kindafunny, youtube.com/kindafunnygames, Apple or Spotify to get all of our shows ad-free. The ability to watch the afternoon podcast like today's in review about Predator live as we record it. And of course, your daily dose of me and a vlog podcast series we call Greg Way. But you're not using your membership benefits right now. So before we talk about GTA 6, here's a word from our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Built. Y'all already know I'm a big points and rewards guy, but here's a PSA for anyone who rents. If you haven't heard of Built, you're about to thank me. Earning points on rent is now a reality when you pay your rent through Built. There's no cost to join Built, and as a member, you will earn valuable points on rent and on your everyday spending. Built points can be transferred to your favorite hotels and airlines, and even the ones you haven't heard of. There are over 500 airlines and 700,000 hotels and properties around the world you can redeem your Built points toward. Points can also be redeemed towards a future rent payment and unique experiences that only Built members can access. So if you're not earning points on rent, my question is, why not? Start earning points on rent you're already paying by going to joinbuilt.com/kindafunny. That's joinbilt.com/kindafunny. Make sure to use our URL so they know we sent you. Joinbuilt.com/kindafunny to start earning points on your rent payments today. That's BILT. This episode's brought to you by Factor. Ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Greg Miller's been loving how simple it is to enjoy his Factor meals as he's rushing between shows each day here at Kinda Funny. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared, perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Multiple people here at Kinda Funny have been loving their experience with Factor, and you can too. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. This podcast is brought to you by Stash. Saving and investing can feel impossible, but with Stash, it's not just a reality, it's easy. Stash isn't just an investing app. It's a registered investment advisor that combines automated investing with dependable financial strategies to help you reach your goals faster. They'll provide you with personalized advice on what to invest in based on your goals, or if you want to just sit back and watch your money go to work, you can opt into their award-winning expert managed portfolio that picks stocks for you. Stash has helped millions of Americans reach their financial goals and starts at just $3 per month. Don't let your savings sit around. Make it work harder for you. Go to get.stash.com/kindafunny to see how you can receive $25 towards your first stock purchase and to view important disclosures. That's get.stash.com/kindafunny. Paid non-client endorsements, not representative of all clients and not a guarantee. Investment advisory services offered by Stash Investments LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Investing involves risk. Offer is subject to T&Cs.
And we're back with the one, the only executive director and video game industry analyst at Circana, Matt Piscatella. Again, thank you so much for this, Matt. This is such an honor to have you here, and you're such a good guest. I want you to know.
That's very kind. Right on.
It is time to talk about the elephant in the room for 2025, maybe 2026. Grand Theft Auto 6. Talk to me about, I mean, people understand the game's going to be big, but why is this such a big deal for your job?
So Grand Theft Auto 6 should be the biggest entertainment launch in U.S. history across anything. That's where the expectations set. It's one of the things that really breaks through, not just into the video game audience, but across, all media.
Sure.
When we talk to consumer, we talk to them all the time. We had a recent study we did in the fourth quarter asking people, what are your expectations for how much you're going to spend next year, what you're looking to buy? Nearly a third of the people we talked to cited that, there's a new game this year I want to get. And, Grand Theft Auto 6 is the one that's doing that. A little bit higher percentage, about 45%, said that there was new hardware this year they wanted to buy. So,
Okay.
Switch 2. It's Switch 2 in GTA 6. And, these are going to be the two things that really move the market this year. But Grand Theft Auto 6 is the one that everyone's looking at as being like, okay, this is the real deal. This is the game that could, kind of change the momentum we've had over the last couple of years.
So are you hopeful? We just talked a little bit about it with the Fortnite analogy. Do you think that we'll see that boom, that it's going to be GTA 6 drops and people are like, oh, well, I'd never bought the PS. During COVID, I bought a PlayStation 4. I bought an Xbox Series S. Now I'm going to buy an X. I'm going to buy a PlayStation 5. Is that the kind of hope we're talking about here?
I think it's an expectation.
Okay.
We saw similar behavior with EA Sports College Football 25.
Hell yeah, you did.
Well, the best-selling sports video game of all time in dollar sales at this point. It tripled the lifetime sales of NCAA Football 07 in its launch month. So this was a massive hit and actually sold boxes. This is expected to do the same, if not a lot more. Now, this market's different than it's been in past years. I don't think you could take a GTA 5 impact on sales of last-gen consoles in 2013 and apply it to what's going to happen in 2025.
Sure.
I'm not going to say 26 because I refuse to believe it. But you could take some inferences there, and that's the belief. And when you look at the purchase intent, you look at just how many people are watching trailers and how many people are talking about this game all the time, then it's one of the games that makes you believe.
I want to know how much you believe. We have a question here that is something that gets kicked around a lot. Gary the Third super chats and says, how much does price point have to do with where we're at? Is $100 GTA 6 even an option?
That quote. Look, you don't need to price a game at $100 as a base price. What's happened over the last few years are gold editions, silver editions, deluxe editions,
the Bloodline edition. Let's go, WWE. Yeah.
All of those are driving the launch sales price well above $60 or $70 already. And you're not forcing consumers into doing that. And they've received absolutely no pushback on it. So I don't know. Could they do it? They could, sure. They could do anything they wanted. Do they need to? I don't think so. But all right. Make it a little technical. I hope you don't mind.
Please.
What we have in this market now is we have a market where, especially on the console side, it's becoming a little bit older, and a little bit more affluent than it had been even at the beginning of the pandemic.
Okay.
What we're seeing is that, people who are a little less affluent, a little younger, they're choosing things like PC and mobile more than they had in the past. These are easy access devices, and they're playing games on them that are a little bit more accessible from a cost standpoint. It's the older, more affluent folks that still have the funds and money available to really invest in these, especially in the big console games, especially at launch. So what we're seeing is very strong day one performance for big games at super premium price points, including things like collectors and deluxe and silver editions and all that. And then we're seeing extended strength at lower price points.
Okay.
But the time we're going from the very high price point to the lower price point is compressing versus what it had been in the past. Like, we're seeing deals more quickly, we're seeing price drops more quickly for a lot of titles, but that's not really hurting the overall spend. So, long-winded way of saying that people who are day one buyers are more willing to spend a higher price. People who are not day one buyers just have to wait a little while. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see. But there's going to be more options for pricing, more ways to enter. And I think, we're seeing that already, whether that's, a game starting premium and going to subscription service, or discounting or price drops. Like, you're seeing more flexibility in the pricing approach. And that's really, I think, what we're going to continue to see going forward, except for Nintendo, because they kind of do their own thing.
Of course. I want to venture in a little deeper on what you're talking about here with household incomes in video game consoles. You had a thread that I really appreciate on Valentine's Day. It wasn't romantic. I went this way. High-income households are becoming a bigger part of the U.S. console hardware market. 49% of U.S. video game console buyers during Q4 2024 had a household income of at least $100,000 a year. This is a record high, beating the 48% seen in Q4 2021. This group accounted for only 29% of video game hardware purchases in Q1 2020. You go on. 45-plus-year-old buyers accounted for 45% of the U.S. console purchasers during Q4 2024, also a record high. Under 44-year-old buyers made up 55% of the console purchasers in the quarter, a record low. During Q1 2020, under 44s made up 69% of purchasers, with 31% being 45 plus. Console buyers, y'all are getting old, but at least you seem to be making more. So you have that going for you, which is nice. And then I like this end point. If any enthusiast board reads this and gets mad for some reason, please know that you are indeed going to live forever, and nothing in gaming is ever going to change from what you want it to be. Parentheses, which is whatever gaming was when you were 12. You're welcome. Well said.
Sorry about that.
No, that's great. That's what I'm talking about. This is why I love following you on Blue Sky. You have so many great stats and so many little jokes like that about that. This is great. People are making more money and they're choosing the right thing. Console, I love that. I'm old. I of course choose console. I just want it to work. I love it. I love that for that reason. And I love my Steam Deck, and that's a conversation for a different time. My question, when you look at the stats and you're seeing, 49% of U.S. video game console buyers during Q4 24, at least $100,000 or more. When you're talking about GTA and you're talking about Switch 2 and you're talking about the year in general, how are you also accounting for what I would call hard times? Eggs cost a lot. Gas is still really expensive. We're about to tariff the shit out of everything. Like, we're not in a great place with the U.S. economy, and it seems like it's going to get remarkably worse. How do you then bring that into forecasting video games?
It's become much more difficult, to say the least. The known unknowns are piling up, and whether you're a fan of the administration or not, you have to admit that they love chaos.
Sure.
And from day to day, you never quite know what you're going to get. So that's part of the baked in uncertainty that we're seeing now. You're absolutely right. Things are not great all over. We have basically a split happening where, the more affluent, the more wealthy you are, we're seeing no slowdown at all in their spending. They're buying everything, and they're buying a lot. people on the, who are not quite as affluent, they're being forced to make extremely difficult choices. And those choices are getting more difficult all the time. What we've seen in the US over the last 2 years is a distinct shift in terms of the number or the percentage of a wallet, meaning, what portion of a person's income is going to different spending areas. We're seeing a distinct shift towards food and everyday spending essentials like housing, and away from what we call general merchandise categories, which are those areas of discretionary spending, things like clothing, video games, all of those beauty products, all of those things where, you have to make a decision. It's not something you have to buy. You
Sure.
can kind of choose or not to. And people are putting off purchases of things like apparel because they're being forced to spend more on things like food. Depending on what happens here, we could see that really kick in even more, which would apply a significant amount of pressure on our categories and could, really push a lot more people to those free to play, easy entry options because you just couldn't afford to do anything else. And I don't know I really don't know what's going to happen next. If anyone does, good for you. But it's a little, it's a little scary is probably a fair way to put it.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at things like food prices and just where the dollars are going. Because people are, just need to spend there. They need to eat.
Of course. Yeah, I think, discretionary spending has always been a concern. I remember when COVID did pop off, and I remember, running a business that is so crowdfunded. You know what I mean? Obviously, we do ads, we do sponsorships, we do a million appearances and blah, blah, blah. But it's like Patreon, getting the membership now on YouTube and Apple and Spotify is such a core pillar of us that for me, I was like, oh man, like people are going to lose their jobs. This is what's going to happen, blah, 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 blah. I thought discretionary spending on video games, I thought people would tighten the purse strings, right? When it was actually the opposite. People were home, video games boomed, our audience boomed as well, because suddenly you didn't have that free time. And then we've seen it since then. We've already talked about on the video game front, okay, then it comes down, we've hit the ceiling, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with us. And so you get into this thing now of like not knowing what the next day is going to bring and what, 6 months from now, everybody's bank account looks like as eggs still cost $1 gajillion. Like you wonder what is going to get cut. And there was a question that went through the chat from Terrence and said, Matt, do you think video games are recession proof? Because this is something people boasted a lot, right? When it was all going south a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, Bobby Kotick said that back in 2008 when Guitar Hero was flying high, and he said it in a Forbes article, and it was wrong then, and it's wrong now. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And it turned out that Guitar Hero wasn't either.
Yeah.
It just happened to hit at the very right time. Now, is the category as susceptible to changes driven by this type of thing as other categories? You could argue not. Certain areas of spending are certainly going to be hit worse than something like video games, especially for that 16% of the audience that really loves video games. Like people are going to choose video games when they want to escape, when they want to feel something other than what they're feeling. And so that's always going to be there. But no, not recession proof. We are as a category are as susceptible to changes in the macro environment as any, especially when we're in a market like we are now, where prices are going to start shifting around dramatically, perhaps even significantly, and that's going to add shocks to the market, and people are going to have to react in the ways they're going to react. We're in, I think, uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to see what happens. Because I don't even know if anyone really fully knows what is going to come down the pipe. So, we just have to wait and see.
And this is what makes this next question impossible to answer. So I'm just looking for your prognostication on this one, right? But like with the constant threat of tariffs and this, that, and the other, and da-da-da-da, do you think Nintendo is sweating that with Switch 2? Is that something they would they be willing to eat the cost on and not raise from what the price point they want to? Or are they just going to do it? Like, what do you think about all that?
It's tough to say. Yeah. I don't have any, inside knowledge of that. Obviously, they're doing a lot of work around it, as is everyone. I talk to publishers and retailers all the time. This has come up. The price point questions come up a lot. Like, where do we price games? How do we react? My advice that I've been giving to publishers is, if you're selling a physical good, maybe have, a little bit more on hand in your warehouse right now than you would normally otherwise have. Be sure that you're communicating to folks that you're doing everything you can to maintain availability and, to maintain a good price point. But, it's one of those things where everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens. You have your scenario plans and you have to react because you just never quite know what's going to happen. So I have no idea what they're going to price at. I don't know, if they even know at this point because, a lot of these things are still happening. So it's extremely difficult to say. Hopefully it's nothing.
Yeah.
If it is something, then, everyone's going to have to react. Acer has already announced that they're lifting the prices of their PCs, driven by the tariffs on the China market. And, that's just one of those things we're going to have to ride the wave on a little bit.
I feel like with this looming threat that no one can really nail down yet, this question becomes like two timelines. But we're talking about the youth with their tablets, their PCs, the olds like me with our consoles and blah, blah, blah. A conversation that is continually happening is, how much longer will consoles be around? When I was at IGN, literally 18 years ago, we were like, oh, well, you probably got a PS4 generation and then it's over. Like, will it actually be able to? And we've seen such crazy success throughout. One of your Blue Sky posts, PlayStation 5 has been the bright spot for the console business in recent quarters. Interesting tidbit from today's results, and these were from February 13th. The U.S. accounted for approximately 30% of the PS4 unit sales through December 2017 and 33% of the PS5 unit sales through December 2024. PS5 is currently 7% ahead of PS4's U.S. unit sales price. What is your prediction on the future of video game consoles? And then, of course, I'd love to hear the alternate take of tariffs do roll in and things get crazy. Is this the kick in the ass to everybody going digital, going every screen's an Xbox in the same way it was in 2020 of COVID, of you just play games, buy a system, you're at home, blah, blah, blah?
So if the console market itself has been relatively stable for many years. So it goes up and down. It's cyclical. New consoles come in, it goes up. Consoles get old, it goes down. It peaked in 2008. 2008 was the year that console hardware sales peaked. And ever since then, it's been a mature market.
Yeah.
So, what I think is going to happen, pending any significant shocks to the system, I think we continue to get new boxes that let people play their shiny new games on their shiny displays. I don't think that changes. What I do think changes over time is the flexibility of those devices. We are seeing diminishing returns on graphical fidelity. Going from PS1 to PS2, you could sure see it.
Oh, yeah.
Going from PS4 to PS5, a little bit more difficult, except for, the sickos and the chat. That, pixel count digital foundry videos.
I need the reflections in my puddles.
I need to see the puddles.
Yeah. But generally we're seeing diminishing returns there. So what I think happens is I think, the Steam Deck and the Switch have provided a, path towards, more hybrid devices that can display excellent quality on a screen, but also be able to take in remote. All kinds of different ways of adding flexibility to those devices. But I still think people are going to want to hook up a new box to play new games on their new displays. Now, in the shorter term, if we get 50% tariffs, I don't see how that doesn't have an impact in where people decide to play, at least in the short term. But that's an extreme case, and
sure.
And you know what? We've never seen it before, and we don't know what'll happen. But you have to imagine that people are going to adjust their spending behaviors and their patterns, given significant changes in price. Like, that's just kind of human nature. I hope we don't see it. I really do, for all kinds of reasons.
Oh, yeah.
But it would just be unfortunate.
I feel like this is in this vein of questioning, but we can take away the negative part of like what could happen tomorrow. Well, instead, we'll talk about, give me your February 20th, 2025 read on Xbox Game Pass and Xbox's strategy. Like, what are we seeing there in terms of growth, in terms of success? I have a question about how Game Pass goes into your whole algorithm, but we'll get to that in a second. Right now, February 2025, where are we at with Xbox Game Pass from your vantage point?
All right. Let me put this in a way that doesn't get me a phone call. All right. So the Xbox strategy, right, has been evolving. Clearly, they've been talking about the change in strategy. We went from a Game Pass first initiative to now we want to provide content to everyone everywhere. That's a pretty significant shift. I don't think those changes are anywhere near done. I think what happened. So, all right. So Call of Duty Black Ops 6 going to Game Pass was that was pushing in all the chips, right? That was making the big bet. I think the results from that are mixed. We did see an increase in folks subscribing. We saw really healthy, like fantastic sales across platforms. Xbox sales for Call of Duty Black Ops 6, you could tell a difference because it was available on Game Pass. Of course you could. But it didn't hurt sales on PlayStation at all.
Sure.
And it didn't really help sell Xbox Series consoles. So a bit of a mixed bag there. Now, their overall results that they report on the gaming division have been consistently strong, despite hardware declining. And, they're the ones that are most on the bleeding edge of new technologies, new ways to play, expanding. I'm trying to find new avenues. So in that respect, I have a lot of confidence in what they're doing. But they're doing things that aren't the traditional model. And you know what? Sony's not doing the traditional model either anymore with their expansion into PC and other categories. But Xbox is really kind of leading the way on doing things differently, partially because they have to, but partially because there's opportunity there. So, but one of the things that they have to keep doing is adjusting on the fly because, not every idea is going to work, and trying to find the best way forward through those bumps in the road is kind of how that works. So cautiously optimistic, but yeah, they might come out with an Xbox OS Steam Deck-like device. They might come out with some other crazy thing. Who the hell knows, right? And that could change the dynamic as well. So ultimately, though, I'm glad that games are getting in front of more people in more places because the consumer of today, the game player of today, demands playing what they want, where they want, with who they want, or with whom they want. And forcing people to just go down one road may not be the optimal case for everyone.
I like that. The question came from BJ Bernardo as a YouTube super chat. BJ says, great interview, guys. Thank you, BJ.
Thanks, BJ.
How does Game Pass and subscription services affect the internal equation you were talking about earlier in the show? Do they make gaming a little more accessible?
It does. So subscription services have been weird. They had a pretty nice growth period there in 2021. Of course, Game Pass Ultimate came around, nice little boost there. But for several years, spending on subscription services was flat. There's a percentage of the audience, probably a good chunk of the folks in the chat, who subscribe because they are super interested in playing a lot of games, a lot of variety. But what we found is that audience is not mass market. The mass market audience, they'll buy their 2 games or 1 or 2 games a year and play Fortnite and be just fine with it. They're not interested in a service like, PS Plus Extra or Game Pass Ultimate. Now, Call of Duty helped boost it a little bit, but, it's like a 12% growth rate in total subscription spending because of it. It wasn't this massive jump. So it is what we're seeing as subscription services now is a nice supplement to the main offering, which is the premium content sold at a premium price, or free to play driven by add-on content spend. Subscription's a nice to have. It's a little bit of an extra rather than a core selling component of a platform at this point.
Excellent. Matt, you know I love you, and you're a great guest. I could talk to you all day long, but I know you have to do real work at some point. So I got 2 questions and then a rapid fire segment, and then I'll get you on your way, I swear. Motor World Hype Super Chats for question number 1 and says, what would Matt say is the number 1 contributing factor to the inflating cost of making AAA games?
So to be honest, that side of the equation isn't really my wheelhouse anymore since I left publishing. Really tough for me to say. I think, the general assumption that the games have become bigger and more complicated, have required more people, is probably the right direction. But
Sure.
Honestly, I don't know.
Fair. I lied. There was one other super chat I wanted to get to. It came from Dakota. Dakota super chatted and said, any advice for an aspiring entertainment media analyst? I have a master's of business analytics and an MBA, but I'm struggling to get a response. Thanks.
I got very lucky. I was pulled in 2005. I was working at Master Foods USA in Vernon, California, analyzing dog food sales. And if you don't know Vernon, it's a very industrial part of Los Angeles. It was next door to the Farmer John hot dog factory.
Okay.
So it did not smell good. Anyways, that's kind of a sidetrack. But I was pulled in at a point in the industry's time when I got very lucky. Today, there are more opportunities to get data and get involved in it. There are a couple people that built careers out of that very approach. Daniel Ahmad,
Yeah.
huge on the social media. He was just someone on forums that would collect data and analyze earnings reports, and he's turned that into an incredible career. He's a fantastic analyst. There are some folks on places like the Install Base forum who do absolute wonders with very limited data inputs. So when you're talking about this stuff, just look at the earnings reports, dig into the data that's available, and just keep applying and keep in mind that any analytics role that gets you some experience and digging into the numbers, at some point can be applied to those areas that you're passionate about. And I wish you all of the best. I don't know if that's good advice.
That's great advice, I think, personally. Great job on that. And then my final question before the rapid fire section is this. You listen to podcasts, you see everybody on social media. What would you say, both for pundits like me, but also just the audience of, the people in the chat who are talking to you about games? What's the biggest thing we don't get that you look at, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe that people don't understand this aspect or this idea?
For the most part, the people I chat with or when I listen to you or Bosman or some of the other folks that are talking about this stuff a lot, like, you guys get it.
Okay.
And a lot of the people I talk to on social media, they get it. I think what trips people up is, and this trips people up across the board in life, is they think that their own sample size of one or their sample size of close friends are representative of the overall market. And then they make assumptions based on what they like, as though the entire industry works that way.
Yep.
I think that's the one thing that trips people up. Have empathy, put yourself in other people's shoes, think about the things that they might want and the pressures that they might be under, and try to help, and try to understand where someone else might be coming from. That's not just, talking about video games, but kind of talking about life. But it's the same kind of thing, I think, which really kind of trips people up when they talk about gaming.
Excellent. Okay, I have 5 rapid fire. Clear your mind. I say it, you tell me what's going on, okay?
Yes.
AI in gaming.
Look, AI has been in gaming for a very long time. Incredible tool to be used for development. Gen AI, completely different thing. I believe people want to play and experience stories created by people. I don't think that having Gen AI create a game, well, I don't, the technology is going to develop. Ultimately, I think people want to experience stories told by storytellers. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Great answer. The future of physical versus digital.
You have another 10 years.
Okay.
Nintendo will be the last company really supporting it. Right now, physical has been in steep decline over the past year. Physical software sales in January hit an all-time January low. So, if you want to have physical games available, buy physical games because fewer people are doing it.
PlayStation 5 Pro.
So remember we're talking about the older, more affluent console consumer?
Yeah.
Perfect fit for that. In fact, in the fourth quarter last year, we saw a pretty big spike in that 100K plus audience. So in the third quarter of last year, July through September, about 35% of console buyers were 100K plus. In the fourth quarter, the holiday quarter, it jumped to 49%. So, I think that aligns with the PS5 Pro launch. It's a premium device targeted at an affluent consumer. It did its job, and that's what it's for. It's not meant to replace the base SKU, but it's meant to, increase the price paid if someone's willing to pay it.
Fantastic. Your fourth prompt here: Switch 2 predictions.
I'm hoping it's first half. I think it'll do well. I think the Switch outselling the PlayStation 2 in the United States so far sets an incredibly high bar. I don't know that Switch 2 will be able to achieve in the current market, although it could get close. I'm cautiously optimistic. The uncertainty around price points makes me extremely nervous, especially with, tariffs potentially hitting in and around launch. A lot of uncertainty in that respect, but is Nintendo going to deliver a great product? I mean, of course, I would bet on that every single day. So I think it's going to be a great product, and hopefully it finds a great response.
And your final rapid fire prompt: self-care.
Self-care is great. So look, these are interesting times, and you have to control what you can control. And if entities are mucking around with your personal data, you should take steps to protect it. If you're feeling stressed out, step back, manage what you can manage, control what you control, be good to people around you, no matter where you are on the political spectrum. And hopefully, everything will be okay. But, if you get overwhelmed, ask for help. It's an overwhelming time.
Matt, you are such a ray of sunshine. I bring up the self-care topic because, of course, you are awesome on Blue Sky at giving all the video game stuff and then also just dropping in, hey, it's Saturday and everything is still off the rails. So do some self-care. Wash your sheets. They're gross. And replace that sad excuse for what used to be a toothbrush you've been using way too long. You're like such a friendly dad dropping advice in the con. I'm like, oh, man, it's what I need right now on social media.
Yeah, I'm feeling I don't have kids. Because I just wanted to, get a job and buy all the games I wanted, but I never had kids. So I'm going to be like your pretend old video game dad. I'm totally okay with that.
Fantastic. Matt, I love you. Thank you so much for spending so much time with us. Where can people keep up with you?
I love you too, Greg, and I love your community and everything you do and the team does. Really, all the respect in the world for what everyone there has been able to accomplish.
Thank you.
I'm over on Blue Sky. I'm not anywhere else because, one social media site's enough. But find me there. All the latest results are there. Always happy to chat and answer questions. So give me a shout.
You're the best, Matt. Don't be such a stranger. Let's not wait too long. Let's get you back here whenever you want. Whenever you got big news, whenever you got big numbers, come on through. How about that?
All right, well, Switch 2 is launching hopefully soon, so maybe we'll chat then.
Sounds great. For now, I'll remind everybody that this has been the Kind of Funny Gamescast. Each and every weekday, we get together to talk about the biggest topics in gamings, whether they be reviews, previews, or things we need to talk about. If you like talking with us, of course, you should watch us live. We're live on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames, twitch.tv/kindoffunnygames, podcast services around the globe each and every weekday with a bevy of programs for you to enjoy. Our programming day isn't done. You got Andy and Nick streaming Avowed as part of an NVIDIA-sponsored stream up next. You already got Games Daily. If you're a member, which, hey, You liked this show, you liked this interview, patreon.com/kindafunny, youtube.com/kindafunnygames, Apple and Spotify. Get your Kinda Funny membership so you can watch in review later this afternoon live as we record it. But maybe it's not. Maybe you're somewhere else. Maybe it's on demand. Maybe it's years from now. Remember, like, subscribe, share, ring the bell, leave a review, do everything else you can. Because, again, it's so hard to get people to click that link. We need you telling your friends that you enjoyed this content. Until next time, it's been our pleasure to serve you.